When you're in a reading slump, read a graphic novel. When you're in a reading slump, read a graphic novel. When you're in a reading slump and you feel like such a chump. When you're in a reading slump, read a graphic novel. Hey y'all, it's Laura and you're watching this video because you want to know what I read in October. October was a reading slump month for me. More and more of those lately, and I don't really know why. I just haven't wanted to read, It's been a shame spiral. I've really wanted to read. There's so many books and stories that I want to absorb into myself. Maybe just the sheer amount of that is phasing me a little bit. My commute to work has gotten a little bit longer, so I've started listening to audiobooks, so I completed my first audiobook this month. Also in October, I filmed and uploaded 5 videos out of the 9 I was supposed to do based on my schedule, so I was slacking a little more than I wanted to. The videos were not coming together. I'd rather upload something that has some quality or value to it rather than something that was rushed or not quite right or that I wasn't happy with yet. So that's why I didn't upload as much as I'd hoped to in October. I also went to Colorado Teen Book Con. 2 of the videos that I didn't finish putting together were my vlog and my book haul from that event because there just was way too much footage. So I just kind of need to take chunk-sized pieces and work with that so I don't get as overwhelmed and stressed. So sometime in November, you'll finally see the vlog of the Colorado Teen Book Con and my book haul from that event. Now on to the books. I read some graphic novels that I got in from my library. So I found that graphic novels are a really great way to quickly read something so you're still reading a story even if you're not in the mood for a full novel. So one of the first I read this month was the second in the Lumberjanes series, Friendship to the Max. This is a very fun and silly graphic novel. A graphic novel is really just a type of format, not really a type of story. So there's graphic novels in all sorts of genres. This is kind of like a humor, sci-fi, fantasy. So it follows 5 friends who are at a summer camp for hardcore lady types and they're trying to work on their badges. Meanwhile, all this crazy stuff is happening in the forest that they have to deal with. And they just are wonderful friends, and it's ridiculous some of the stuff that gets added in, but it's just meant to be fun. It's not meant to be taken too seriously. So if you're looking for a fun, lighthearted read, I recommend Lumberjanes. After reading the first volume of Miss Marvel back in September, I picked up the next 3 volumes in that series. Volume 2, Generation Y, Volume 3, Crushed, and Volume 4, Last Days. So in these 3, Kamala Khan has really embraced her powers as Miss Marvel and finds out more about her heritage both from her Pakistani American side and her superhero crazy side. Of these, my favorite was definitely Crushed. It all had to do with dating different people, and Loki even showed up and crashed the school Valentine's dance. This series does continue in Volume 5, Super Famous, and I'm excited to pick that up. The series is so great because it's not set in New York City or Metropolis or Los Angeles or something like that. It's set in Jersey City, where it's often overlooked because of all the crazy stuff that happens in New York City. So she's really passionate about her hometown and where she lives. She's passionate about her heritage, she's passionate about her family, friends, and saving people and wanting to make a difference. Female Role Model of the Year right here. The next thing I chose to read in October was Run by Kody Keplinger. If you aren't on Twitter, you may not be aware of all the stuff that went down. I'll summarize this as briefly as I can for those who aren't aware of the situation. I will link plenty of more information down below if you'd like to read and educate yourself more on what happened with this book. Basically, a biphobic review came out in June about this book, Run by Kody Keplinger, from VOYA magazine, stands for Voice of Youth Advocates. They're a smaller literary magazine that kind of tailors to librarians in choosing what to buy for their collections. Often smaller libraries, if they can find a starred or published review of a book, it helps them get those books into the hands of their patrons and their readers. So harmful reviews of good books keeps those books out of the hands of disadvantaged libraries. So the issue comes up where at the end of the review, the reviewer says that Bo, one of the main characters, is bisexual and that there is explicit language, therefore it's recommended for mature junior and high school students. Not realizing that putting those 2 pieces of information together in the sentence and with the caveat, the clause, intended for mature audiences, the fact that she is bisexual, that is her orientation, is only intended for older, mature audiences that can possibly handle it. That needs a mature rating on it, that younger people can't read this book because of that. She does not have sex or kiss anyone at all in this book. There is a ton of explicit language, that makes sense, but putting those 2 pieces of information in that sentence was a train wreck of a review. So when it was finally pointed out to the editors of the magazine, they responded and retaliated with awful biphobic statements, just the worst. They blocked people on Twitter, they blocked people on Facebook, they even locked down their Twitter, they were deleting comments off of Facebook, they were telling people that orientation and gender and all of that was just Twitter lingo and they didn't need to know it. Instead of apologizing and saying they're sorry and that they will retract it, they did eventually retract it. It just took a dang long time. They tried to cover their butts. They tried to say, no, you're wrong. It took about, I think, 30 days before they finally unlocked most of their social media and talked about the actual sensitivity training that their employees would go through to make sure that this doesn't happen again. So with all of that being said about this book, that's why I finally pushed this to the top of my TBR instead of kind of in the middle where it was ranging. So this is about two girls living in a very, very tiny town in Kentucky with very different life experiences. Agnes is legally blind. She can't go anywhere without her cane or somebody who's trained to help her walk. She can see fuzzy images and shapes, and she can read with a very, very large magnifying glass, but that impacts a lot of her family life and her parents not trusting her in the world or the world with her. The author herself, Kody Keplinger, also has visual impairments, so it's an own voices book, yay! Bo, on the other hand, is basically the talk and the gossip of the town just because of who her family is. So she has this very huge reputation around her. Through unlikely events, these two become friends and eventually go on the run together to find Bo's father. Bo is living with her mother in a trailer home. Her mother has substance abuse problems and they often don't have enough to get by. So the book is told through alternating point of views with Bo with the running away section of the plot and Agnes in the past, and it was just really interesting to see how things came together to get to where they end up. I recommend that you read this book not because of the controversy around this book and in this event, but because of the inherent homophobia that still exists in the publishing industry and the ways that you can combat it by reading and supporting books that have representation of people different from yourself. I would like to point out that that original VOYA magazine review did not include the 3 cases of heterosex that do exist in this book. Don't mention that. Don't mention that at all. Then I picked up Text from Jane Eyre by Mallory Ortenberg. This was so funny. It was basically like pop culture references in textual form of different classical and literary characters and books and even authors sometimes and poets. Some of the pages kind of look like this. I don't know if you can see with the white balance. It's a little annoying because they don't always label who's speaking with the characters. Most of the times I can make a really good inference, but other times I was like, it's been a while since I've read Medea. It really does span everywhere from like Greek tragedy to Harry Potter. So you could probably skip over the ones that you're a little less familiar with. For some of the authors, I just had a vague idea about like the stereotypes about them, so I could kind of pick up on that. Surprisingly, there's only one chapter about Jane Eyre in Text from Jane Eyre, and it was the best chapter ever because, well, I won't spoil why it's great, but it was one of my favorites and I was really disappointed there weren't more. The next book I read, I listened to as an audiobook on my daily commute, and that was All the Bright Places by Jennifer Niven. Finch has an undiagnosed bipolar disorder, and it puts him in different times of the asleep time of his life and the awake time, basically between his depressive and his manic states, and he's trying to avoid the asleep. He wants to live life. He has many suicidal ideations, but he doesn't want to die. He doesn't want to do that. He kind of lives his life recklessly though. He comes from a dysfunctional family. His father was very abusive, so his parents had a divorce, and he has never really quite reconciled that happened. Violet Markey, on the other hand, is recovering from her sister's death last year that she feels directly responsible for, so she's been through a kind of a depressive state as well. They find each other one morning on the top of their school's bell tower, both thinking about wanting to jump off the bell tower, and from there they pair up for a school project to discover the wonders of Indiana, all the wonderful small little things that people should know about Indiana. I've been to the Midwest. It's only wonderful for people who live there. I lived in Ohio. I want to hear about the wonders of Ohio. Like, people just want to hear about where they're from. There were many fascinating wonders, but it just felt so trite. Let's go through some of the pros of this book. I am so glad that mental health, suicide, and depression are becoming less stigmatized issues, that we can actually talk about them in a book instead of just as a footnote. And that's it. That's really the main pro I have about this book. This book is not for people with depression or who have suicidal ideations. It is a huge trigger for that. This is a book for people who have friends who have depression, who have friends who have committed suicide, and that's where I have issues so much because so much about mental health is not covered in this book. The 2 main forms of treatment, group therapy and medication, are completely looked down and turned away from in this book. Basically, the way that they heal in this book is by talking together and falling in love and going on wonders together, and that's how Violet comes out of her depressive state and how Finch tries to get better. And it doesn't work that way. Wanting to get better isn't how you overcome your mental illness. Additionally, Finch is an abuser, following Violet when she doesn't want to be followed, and just continually pestering her and trying to insert himself into her life when she says no. I started talking about this topic a little bit on Twitter this week about abuse from my own personal experiences of going through an abusive relationship, and I still can't really form my words of what that meant for me and what that means in literature nowadays with what I'm reading and seeing myself on the page as Violet. Oh my god. I don't want to share too much about this past relationship since the person I'm discussing isn't in my life anymore. I can't really ask them how they feel about being represented this way. But I did have a relationship with someone who was emotionally abusive and who also had suicidal ideations and was going through depression. They did not often take their medication. They did not often attend their therapy, and often I was like the one source of good in their life, which isn't healthy. Which isn't healthy for either people in that situation at all. Reading that and reading this with Violet and seeing her fall in love, I saw so much of my own self and my own situation in this book, and I was scared. I was scared for people reading this book and romantically idolizing this and thinking that this is okay when it's not. I do not recommend this book. I do not recommend this book at all. I knew I needed to finish. I needed to know how it ended, and I'm appalled. I am actually appalled with all of this. I will make a video review just about this book so I don't spoil too much anymore than I probably already have. Probably talking about my own relationship with someone who had a mental illness. But that I can't keep talking about it today, no. One other issue I have with this book is because the author said she wanted to write something edgy. Mental health, mental illness is not edgy or cool or something you can add in as a plot point. I don't care what you think or what you say. This is serious issues and serious situations of what people have gone through. And this book isn't edgy. I don't care that you wanted to write a young adult edgy book. This isn't edgy. This is sick. I understand that the author went through something similar and wanted to write from experience, but I feel like she idealized it rather than talking about the dangers of suicide and of depressive thoughts and of suicidal ideations. There are hotlines and helplines in this book, but there's not a trigger warning anywhere on this book for people who have depression or have bipolar disorder before reading this book, and that's terrifying. Let's take off the mature audience warning signs on all those romance novels and put them on books like this, because I'm disgusted. If you've read this book and you love it, that's wonderful. That's great for you. I just can't support this. I can't keep talking about this book. This doesn't even go on the shelf. Doesn't even go on the shelf. Moving right along to something a little happier is The Sun Is Also Starred by Nicola Yoon. I've read this book twice because I needed it as a happy, contemporary, lovely book. Also, I needed to review it. So you can click right here and watch my spoiler-free review of this book. I love and adore it so much. There's wonderful representation, there's wonderful cultural conversations, there's wonderful everything. It's everything, everything. Okay, when are you gonna stop saying that? This is the second book from Nicola Yoon. It is about two people who meet in Manhattan, and they never ever would have met had all of these other very specific situations and circumstances occurred for them to meet. So I also really like the idea of when things happen, not just that they happen, but when in the course of our lives and how it all comes into play. So I really recommend this book. It's like a great thinker of learning a lot about cultures I wasn't as familiar with. Very well researched, very well written. Science meets poetry, really. Those are all the books I read in October. You should comment below with your favorite book that you read in October, one that you would recommend to everyone. I would love to know it and probably add it to my TBR. My name is Laura. This has been Bookies and Cookies. I post videos on Sundays and Thursdays, and I love each and every one of you, and I hope you never forget that you're loved, and remember that you are valued. Do not let anyone take your self-worth away. Thanks, y'all. Want to hear a funny story? I bought this bag of candy corn for one Bookstagram picture. I haven't eaten it. I don't even like candy corn.